Hello YouTube, this is a continuation of my previous video regarding the absurdity of the official story of Osama bin Laden's death. As I was discussing, even if we are to believe the official story, there's very little evidence, if any credible evidence, regarding the allegation that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. So you take him to a court and prove it, and then sentence him to prison. You do not assassinate him. This gives the U.S. government carte blanche to just claim anyone's responsible for an atrocity on American soil or any other atrocity, since they seem to do whatever they want, and then simply assassinate them. This is not how civilized people, quote-unquote, this is not how humane people operate. This is how people who do not wish to succumb to any that do not wish to succumb to any regulation, do not wish to succumb to any limitations placed on them by international norms, norms of morality or humanness. This is how they operate. Now, to the contrary of to supplement the fact that there is virtually no evidence that Al-Qaeda and bin Laden was responsible for 9/11, there is sufficient and conclusive evidence, as presented by architect Richard Gage, as well as others, that demonstrate that the official story behind 9/11 is an utter fraud and that the buildings were brought down by controlled demolition. This, of course, strongly suggests, as I've gone over in my previous videos, for reasons that should be obvious, for a variety of reasons, it strongly suggests that the U.S. government was complicit in the attacks or carried them out on their own without any others, but at the very least had some role in the attacks. Now we bring into the picture the fact that Al-Qaeda was funded by the United States, or the Mujahideen rather, was funded by the United States under Jimmy Carter. This has all been admitted by Zbigniew Brzezinski, former national security advisor to Jimmy Carter. Mujahideen, which gave rise to Al-Qaeda, was given millions of dollars, I believe, by the United States government. This is well documented. And then we have whistleblower Sybil Edmonds of the FBI, who has whistleblown the fact that has brought to the surface the fact that bin Laden was working not only for the United States government in the 80s and 90s, not only as a CIA asset in the 80s and 90s under the codename Tim Osman, but as has been revealed through declassified government documents, but was also working for the United States up to and through the September 11, 2001 so-called terrorist attacks. Or, I guess regardless of who was responsible, they are terrorist attacks because they had a political motive, that is to enslave the American people and to launch illegal foreign wars. But that Osama bin Laden was working for the CIA through 9/11. This is according to FBI whistleblower Sybil Edmonds. You can look up her testimony. You can look up the fact that the FBI placed a gag order on her because they did not want her to speak her truths regarding the immorality and corruption present within the United States government. So this is the other facet to the story, that even if his assassination was, as it was said, it occurred recently, even if that was the case, we have the fact that it violates norms of international law, and even if you don't place credence on international law, which I have my my issues with, given my anarchist tendencies. I would like to see no governmental bodies or bureaucratic institutions dictate from on high laws to the rest of the citizenry, whether in a nation or, in this case, on an even wider scale internationally. But even if you don't place much credence in international law, you can acknowledge that if there's no evidence that someone was responsible for a crime, or very little evidence indicating that someone was responsible for a crime, you try them. In a court of law, it's a much more just procedure than simply assassinating them in someone else's country. And then, I don't recall, I believe a family member of his was killed, and this is simply overlooked and disregarded callously by the mainstream media and by the citizenry. So the fact that Osama bin Laden was killed makes it justified to kill one of his relatives. That's obviously absolutely absurd and inhumane. Similar to the fact that NATO bombed Gaddafi's compound recently in Libya, or wherever he was headquartered or staying temporarily, and they killed one of his sons. And this is just accepted, like Fox News, CNN nonchalantly just saying, oh yes, NATO strike today, killed one of Gaddafi's sons, his youngest son, I believe. Okay, Gaddafi may be a mass murderer, he certainly is a tyrant, but the fact that this makes it okay for the United States to, A, intervene in Libya, given their history of intervention and given the demonstrable fact that this has absolutely nothing to do, or virtually nothing to do, with humanitarian aid and support for the Libyan people, it is assumed that killing his son is acceptable. I mean, this is murder. This is the United States. Imagine if, Gaddafi said, we're going to launch an invasion of the United States. We feel that the military-industrial complex and now Barack Obama is responsible for the deaths of countless thousands of innocent people, much worse than anything Gaddafi's done. In fact, millions in Iraq, over 1 million, as well as thousands in Afghanistan, God knows how many in Pakistan, etc., etc. More in Yemen and Libya now. They're responsible for all these deaths. We're going to invade, and we're going to attempt to assassinate Obama, and we're going to... And if we kill his daughter in the process, we're just going to nonchalantly report it on our mainstream media and we'll expect no reprisals. No, they would be annihilated. They would be brutally attacked by the United States if they ever did something of that nature. But the fact of the matter is, the United States is the most powerful nation in the world. They, and as such, they have asserted the right to practice global hegemony, to have hundreds of military bases all over the world, to undermine the sovereignty of whatever nations they wish to undermine, to kill countless thousands or rather millions of people, to displace countless others, and whilst domestically enslaving the domestic population via the procedures that have now things have now escalated to the level that we're now seeing the TSA molest people before they get on the airplanes, and they're with plans to roll these out to trains and highways and etc., etc., etc. But they just assert the right to do whatever they want because they can. I mean, this seems to be the modus operandi of authoritarian or overly oppressive institutions, whether it be the government in its upper echelons via the CIA, which has overthrown countless democratically elected governments, I believe over 50 in the past 50 or so years. This is the modus operandi. It is, we do it because we can. And whether it be the police, they get away with, they murder with impunity and immunity. They harass poor people and homeless people because they can. They get away with it, so they do it. They feel this, they have this perceived entitlement by virtue of their power. And this is insane that people with, this is the problem with power inherently, and it is also the problem with the way it's manifested in our society, that it gives people this extrajudicial, extra-moral ability to do whatever they feel inclined, compelled, etc. to do. Now, not only is this a problem amongst institutions and amongst legal institutions primarily, but it is also a problem amongst the general mentality of society itself, and specifically it pertains to your average Joe, when we think that we have the right, by virtue of our ability, to, say, relocate a bird nest, or kill a bird, or kill a rabbit, or, you know, even while this doesn't disturb me immensely, the fact that we feel we have a right to, say, kill a bunch of ants, or kill a bee that is in our house. Like, I don't allege that this is a tragedy, and I recognize the fact that there are differences in various animal species in terms of their ability to feel pain and comprehend what's happening to them, etc. But it's a scale. It's a sliding scale from perhaps humans and other mammals, such as dolphins, etc., who feel who are negatively affected, who feel pain and who are negatively affected by imprisonment and restriction, etc., to the other end of the spectrum with ants and other simple insects that do not have remotely close to the brain capacity we have, cannot really think in any real sense of the term, etc. But it is a subjective spectrum that one cannot draw a rational, objectively grounded line in the sand and anywhere along that spectrum. So to me, the correct approach and the humane approach seems to be that we draw the line in the only place where it can rationally be drawn, and that is, we just don't have perceived entitlement to do whatever we want to other people or animals. None whatsoever. If the bird wants to build a nest there, what gives you the right to kick that bird out of their home so that you can turn on your patio light without killing the bird? Why not just not turn on your patio light? I mean, this is just, a close to home, I suppose you could say, example of this perceived entitlement and this arrogance and it's born out of our hierarchical society. It's born out of this domination, competition, neuroses plagued society in which we feel the desire to dominate others. We feel the desire to imprison and control and limit others, as opposed to working for mutual psychological health and betterment of our quality of life. We see what happens is, and what happened is, when civilization began, a bunch of immoral, inhumane individuals decided to subjugate others to their will, and this perpetuated a paradigm in which ultimately a significant percentage of the population became dehumanized. And when you become dehumanized, and at the upper echelons of government, for instance, let's take Janet Napolitano, for example, the current head of Homeland Security, when you become so dehumanized that you want to dehumanize other people, because the remnants of your humanness are simply a reminder of your lack of humanness. So what you want to do is squash all of your humanness, and the manner in which you do this often is to perpetuate this system of increasing control. Because the more you diminish your humanness, or others' humanness, societal humanness, and as a consequence your own humanness, the more you diminish those, the more you cannot stand to be reminded of anything that is human. Because it's much easier to continue perpetuating this cycle of degradation and control than it is to reverse the trend and to become human when you have decimated the natural world and subjugated vast swaths of people to your will. So, yeah, does that make sense? How's that for a rant? But you can read more about this by reading Anarchist Theory. That's not a title to a specific book, just Anarchist Theory generally. By reading Derek Jensen's Endgame, by reading I don't know, just read something, for God's sake. Too few people read in our current society. But I'm running out of time. That's the situation. This, Bin Laden thing is transparently something that individuals should call into significant question. And even if you accept the official story, you don't just assassinate someone without subjecting them to a fair trial, especially when the United States government was almost certainly responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Thanks for listening.